Hello and welcome to 9394, a music podcast with Travis Roy. You know who I am. I'm the guy whose name is in the title. Thanks for joining me. I'm really happy to have back on the show Joe Lowry, and he has come to discuss one of the biggest bands of any genre from the 1990s and their least big album. So, light up a joint? That seems appropriate. Sit back and enjoy our conversation. Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Travis?
I'm good, man. Good to see you again.
Definitely.
Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, man. I wanted to come back. I love talking anything. but yeah, it was a struggle for me to really nail down what made sense,
As far as which album to do next?
Yeah, which album, which band,
Yeah.
I'm not a guy who started listening to something and stuck with them forever.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think to a certain degree, I hear that in a lot of the podcasts that you do with 9394, right?
Right.
It's funny. When I told my wife that I was doing a podcast for Sublime, when I told her the band and the album, she's like, I never hear you listen to them. And I'm like, there was a time and a place and you weren't around during that time and a place, right?
I think that works perfectly for this podcast because I feel like there's two ways that guests typically go about it. They either pick like an album that they love that they listen to consistently throughout their life, or they pick something that really spoke to a specific time and place in their life.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I just listened to the Metallica live episode.
Mm-hmm.
Was Brendan, I believe, or something? Brandon, yeah. And you could tell that dude's a Metallica fan for life, right?
Right.
So he's still listening and going to shows and all that stuff. And yeah, there's really not that scenario at play for me with anything that I've been listening to essentially from when the band kind of started through today.
Which makes sense because Bradley Nowell died after the third album and that was it. I mean, they still tour and do stuff, but I haven't seen them. I don't know a lot of people that have seen them. I understand them doing that. It must have been a huge bummer to be right on the cusp of such enormous fame and have your frontman pass away from an overdose right there, right at that exact moment. So I understand them doing it. But yeah, it's not like they've been releasing new material for you to dig your teeth into.
Yeah, it's interesting. They keep releasing stuff, right? You go and look and you're just like, man, I definitely got Secondhand Smoke.
Uh-huh.
And then, the first kind of compilation type of, hey, here's a bunch of rare stuff and, random stuff that didn't get made or got made, but there's different versions of it, yada, yada. And then I got Stand By Your Van, which was a bunch of live stuff on there.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I felt like it was starting to get repetitive, right? I started hearing it and it was just like, okay, I've heard the song and hearing it just a little different didn't really land for me.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just tuned out and there was that acoustic album that came out after, but I didn't even know it. If I had known that, I would have probably gotten into it, but after that everything is just like live shows, anniversary editions, et cetera, so they're still pumping out all the stuff. And then they did the Sublime with Rome kind of stuff, which it was cool to keep those songs in the forefront, and none of their like own songs that they came up with really again were my thing or landed with me. So yeah, again, like I said, time and place, just I haven't stuck it through with them, but man, was that a time and place.
I think that Sublime is a band that really just screams the 90s. You know, most people I know, including myself, I'm wondering if this is true for you as well, did not get into them, say, when 40 Ounces to Freedom came out, or when this album that we're talking about today, Robbin the Hood, came out. It was when the third album, the one that broke, is a self-titled album, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's when people got into it, which was like 96. Is that true for you?
Pretty much. I mean, so kind of going back to the first podcast where I kind of talked about who I listened to, where I was in 93, 94, I was mostly listening to pop and hip hop and rap and gangster rap back in high school in that time frame. But the grunge, alternative rock stuff kind of was hard to miss. And by the time 95 rolled around, I started hanging out with a group of friends that were really into the grunge, you know, the Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam stuff, right?
Yeah.
And Green Day and Offspring. And so I started listening up in the Bay Area to a radio station called Live 105, which they very closely followed K-Rock down here in Los Angeles. So when K-Rock started playing stuff, shortly thereafter, Live 105 would pick it up. So it was almost impossible in 95-ish to not hear Date Rape.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so out here in the West Coast, K-Rock picked up Date Rape in 95, and it got, you know, just a huge amount of momentum out here in California.
Gotcha.
So they were part of my conscious. I knew that song, and that was it, really.
Okay, yeah, in the Midwest, it wasn't until What I Got came out, and then that was huge.
Exactly. So like August of 96, I'm getting ready to come down to San Diego for college, and I think I started to hear it, but not a lot. And then September of 96, I walk into Southern California and it is everywhere down here. I mean, it was a musical education for me. My freshman year of college, that's when I started going to concerts and seeing Pennywise and punk rock and all that stuff. Also got exposed heavily to classic rock because my roommate was a music, that was where he was trying to get his degree. So he was playing me all this stuff that I was unaware of. And ska, one of my other roommates, he played Blink-182 like all the time. And I didn't have any clue who they were. So there was an element of pop punk kind of ish. And so it was just inundated with that first wave of Sublime popularity with their self-titled album. I mean, I couldn't go a day without hearing that somewhere on my campus in San Diego.
I think that was true as a high schooler in Michigan at the time. And that song was inescapable. And for me, I was coming from a place where I had been listening to ska for some time, and I grew up listening to reggae, like Bob Marley in particular. My dad had Legend in the house. So I had like a little bit of a framework to work with there. But I remember I got the Sublime album and I got 40 Ounces to Freedom, which I really loved that album. That was the album that I really got into, was that album. And this album, Robbin the Hood, I skipped it completely. I mean, I know that I heard this in the car of some dude I was friendly with, but not friends with, who knew somebody in Detroit or Flint or Pontiac who sold bad weed. So we were going to drive there and I'd be in his car and hear it there. I always thought it was their first album for a long time until last week. I thought that this predated 40 Ounces of Freedom. Well, because it's demos, right? It's stuff, a lot of it's done on the 4-track and in their rooms and shit.
It's a mess.
So I kind of really skipped this one. There's a few songs on here that were familiar to me, and the best I could figure is that besides hearing it at parties and other people's cars and stuff, I'm sure that in the Napster, Kazaa, LimeWire days, I had a few of these songs collected, but I hadn't really sat down with the album, although I definitely remembered Raleigh's fucking rants. Those stuck out to me. I did remember those. But I hadn't really sat down with this album until the last few weeks, but I'm glad that you picked it because it forced me to spend some time with it.
It was just this self-titled album is awesome. Okay, what else do they have? 40 Ounces of Freedom. Awesome. Love it. Robbin the Hood. And I was just it felt different yet the same because of the haphazardness, because of kind of the Raleigh stuff. And look, these guys were in their
Early
20s. Yeah, when they made it. And so I'm, 18, 19 years old, and some of that now I can't take it, but back then it was I see, that's so cool. Who would put a crazy guy on a record like this, Who would do that? Who would make him famous? That's so cool, and looking back, I'm it's so sad.
Yeah, it's not cool at all. It's exploitive and awkward and misogynistic.
Yeah, it's so bad. But back then, I'm when you were talking Radiohead, I don't remember which Radiohead album you were talking, and you're basically like, here's the ones that, Radiohead fans really like, but if they're like the true they call themselves the true Radiohead fans, and they really say, oh, I'm a Kid A fan, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel this album was for me back then, was like, everyone knows the self-titled, and then people now know kind of the 40 ounces to freedom, smoke 2 joints, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously Date Rape and Bad Fish and all that. But do they know about Robbin the Hood? Because I'm a true Sublime fan if I know about Robbin the Hood, right? And
love it.
Yeah, right. And so you get this like kind of mentality of you're in the inner circle. You got the street cred if you can talk about Robbin the Hood. And so that's what it was for me, is like I ate it up. And I think that was part of it, of being, the cool kid talking about Sublime. Somebody's like, oh, dude, have you heard the song What I Got? And I'm like, let me tell you, there's this album. You have no idea. And it's awesome. Let me tell you, oh, there's this crazy guy on it. You got to listen to it, right?
And you were listening to it like a year almost before he died. So in teenage years, that's a long time. And all of a sudden, the rest of the country's on board, and you're like, well, I'm a true fan. It doesn't matter that this is some of the most accessible music from that era. Not necessarily the stuff on Robbin the Hood, but Sublime in general.
Exactly.
But back to Robbin the Hood, what's your favorite song?
Oh, man. I struggled because when I came back to it and really put it on. So before I even jump into that, let me just tell you, I went to Spotify and I made my own playlist of it and removed all of the Raleigh stuff and removed the reggae dub song, the Cisco Kid song, just the stuff that I couldn't stand listening to repeatedly. And then, so I had a slimmed down version, what I wish was the album with an actual producer there. And then I just listened to it. And I'm like, every song, I'm just like, I like this. I like this. I like this. I like this. And it got a lot better for me. And it got a lot harder for me to choose my favorite song at that point. Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, the main ones that were in the running and the ones I remember strongest were Greatest Hits, Saw Red, and Steppin' Razor. So for me, I have to go with my heart, which even before I put this on, I was going to say Steppin' Razor. Greatest Hits and Saw Red, and we'll get to this later, Pool Shark, those ones are the ones that stick in my head when I walk around and I'm just singing those tunes.
Yeah.
But Steppin' Razor, going back to your comment about reggae, I was hardly ever exposed to reggae, and I had basically the Bob Marley Legend CD, and that was it, right?
Yeah, that was pretty common for dudes of our lack of melanin and time and place.
Exactly. And so I saw on the album that it's a cover of a Peter Tosh song that actually says that on it. I didn't know nothing about nothing back then. I love the song. And then in 98, I transferred back to San Francisco State for various reasons. So I was going to college up there. And, down in San Diego, going back to your bad weed stuff, San Diego was full of that. But it was because they were so close to the Mexican border, so we just got really bad stuff, but we just got a ton of it, and it was so cheap. Going back to the Bay Area was like, just connoisseur type stuff, just high-end, fantastic stuff. And my roommates and I, our main connection was a girl that we went to high school with, her boyfriend, and he was basically into all this reggae stuff. You go into his house, and it was just wall-to-wall of Jamaican reggae roots vinyl. And he's playing in 98. I think it came out in 99, 97, somewhere around there. The Peter Tosh Honorary Citizen 3 booklet type of anthology thing. And Steppin' Razor was on that. He put together so much reggae for us to listen to. It was unreal. And he said, you want to learn about Peter Tosh, you go out and buy this right now. So I went out and bought it and I listened to that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the connection was made between Step and Razor on, Robbin the Hood and Step and Razor by Peter Tosh. And I loved the Peter Tosh version. I love the Sublime version. And so that was just like a fireworks moment in my head back then. And it made me appreciate Step and Razor on Robbin the Hood so much more. And I think it's just a song we're talking about that not many people are going to talk about when they talk about this album.
I feel like it's definitely one of the standouts on the album. It's interesting because this is demo stuff that they record themselves, that the quality is actually really, really high.
Yeah.
They did a really great job. But this song, Step and Razor, like there's like, I don't know, Casio keyboard, kind of like goofy, weird stuff going on with it. This album actually, in a lot of ways, makes me think of a couple of albums that maybe you wouldn't necessarily think to pair up with this, but it makes me think of Mountain Goat's Zapalote Machine, and it makes me think of that first They Might Be Giants album, the Pink album, because it's like such an eclectic collection of songs recorded pretty fucking lo-fi.
Yep.
And especially like that Pink album, Step and Razor in particular makes you think of the Pink album because you get the sense of people experimenting with the instruments that they had around and just recording themselves and just enjoying it and just playing with it and seeing what they could come up with. And Step and Razor, I think, is one of the more standout songs on this album for sure. And it definitely has a more accessible feel than a lot of the songs on the album in a way. Maybe because it's written by another dude.
Yeah, well... and speaking of that, I had no idea that it wasn't like a Wailers or a Peter Tosh song. It's actually some guy named Joe Hayes, I believe, is the gentleman's name, who did it in like the 60s.
It's a standard. It's a reggae standard then.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's been covered by plenty of different folks. But when I was digging in here, I was like, I had no idea. So I'm telling you, man, and we've had this conversation before, back when we didn't have like the internet resources we had today, you're just like, I didn't even know half these songs were like samples and covers of songs that I am familiar and not familiar with. It's just chock full of them on this entire album.
Yeah. And for it being a collection of demos and, as you said, something of a mess, on one hand, it is like a mishmash of shit. And on the other hand, there is some thematic stuff going on here. The love of reggae and music in general, but especially of reggae, is a regular theme in the album, as is like found love and highways and, some other kind of stuff, schizophrenia.
Yeah.
There is some like cohesive elements and like repeated lyrics and stuff throughout that give it a weirdly kind of cohesive feel. I end up going, speaking of found love, STP is my favorite song, I think, on this album. That song just is catchy as hell and just uplifting, and it just kind of makes you feel good, but you could move around to it. And was another one that like I had forgotten about. I'm listening to the album and like, oh shit, yes, I know this song. I know this song well. But I just hadn't listened to it in fucking like 20 years or something. But it's a good tune.
Yeah, and it's interesting how it's basically STP is a secret tweaker pad, right?
Is that what that is? Okay.
And that's what that stands for, right? They even call out in the lyrics, like, my secret tweaker pad is now the hottest spot in town, right? That's one of the lyrics. A lot of this was recorded in like a house that they just crashed, like an abandoned house in kind of, people said it's like a crack house, right?
Yeah, they're squatters.
Yeah. So they basically squatted there and recorded a lot of this there.
Wow.
And so it really kind of shows the theme of the album has a lot of ties into that song because this is where it was recorded, right?
That's wild. And yeah, maybe the main theme of the album is getting fucked up.
Yeah, definitely a lot of that in there.
Yeah. You mentioned the reggae dub. For me, that's the underrated song on the album because I can see not being into it, but I really love the way that they take a conversation and find the musicality in that and like turn it into a song.
Reggae. Reggae? Oh, reggae!
I'm not too into reggae.
Why not?
Oh, well.
Because I don't like it, that's why.
They play rock, blues.
Oh, actually, we play, you know Bon Jovi?
No. I like a little bit of Yeah, I like jazz, blues.
Jazz is
I'm not
great.
too into rap. I really don't like the rap. I like oldies.
Rap.
Some rock. Some hard rock. I even like little Mexican music. Don't understand the shit it's saying, but it's good, you know. Don't understand nothing, but I like it. Now the Indian music, now that's something to trip off of. Because it's like every song is saying the same
You gotta
thing.
be tripping pretty hard.
Yeah, and it makes you trip hard. Shit.
Oh, he's got it going on.
Don't you know that I'm near you, baby?
Yeah.
Every day.
Every day I say,
It gets a little excessive opie. Like, it's like, okay, that's a little much. But some of what they're doing is really interesting, the way that they're able to kind of, I mean, I don't know how intentional it all was, but the jam mixed with the conversation, it works surprisingly well.
Yeah, I really like that. I like the beat on it, and I really enjoyed it back in the day when I was listening to this album a lot.
Yeah, maybe not something to listen to over and over, though.
Exactly. So I'm sitting here pounding through all these songs going, I don't know what my favorite song is, and I don't want to listen to them talking again. So it got cut out. But no, I totally appreciate that. I mean, there's so much variety of musicality across all of these songs that are the songs themselves, and even like the Cisco Kid that I cut out too, there's parts of that song that I really enjoy as well.
Ambient, right? It's kind of like mood setting.
Yeah, there's so much here, and you're just like, I really wish there was a real producer involved in this album to come through and clean it all up and get rid of some of the stuff. But, you know, hey, the time and place, and you get it. This is where they were at, and Bradley was experimenting left, right, and center, trying to come up with that next creative thing to keep the band going. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on him to create, and I think he was kind of just a spinning top, shooting out arrows every direction he could.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, this seems like a peek behind the veil, like an album between two real albums, but it was really just them learning what they were into and just kind of fucking around and experimenting and playing around. It kind of does seem like we're hearing something in other bands that would end up in their vault, you know, just like not necessarily for public release. But these guys were clearly kind of freewheeling. What about you? What did you choose as your underrated track on this album?
Yeah, you know, it took me a while to figure it out. And I kind of like to let Spotify listens kind of say, okay, well, I'm not going to pick, you know, the 5 most popular songs on the album here to a certain degree. But this one was in a lower level of listens. And the other approach that I often hear you taking is was it underrated for me that I hadn't been giving it its due. For me, was Falling Idols. Now, no lyrics, so that kind of makes it a, you know, one that, again, like you're saying, that ambient type of stuff, it was just something I didn't really get into back in the day. I didn't know the backstory. I didn't even know that there was a band called Falling Idols that was kind of a punkish type of, I think they called themselves like cowpunk, surf, rockabilly, something or other.
Okay.
Some craziness that was down in that Long Beach, Belmont Shores area. Strangely enough, making the connection to my last visit, Randy, the bassist for Pennywise, actually played in the Falling Idols at one point.
Oh, go figure.
So they did the self-titled song, Falling Idols. Oh. And Randy actually wasn't in the band at the time when they made that. He was asked in an interview, which version do you like better? And he's like, oh, easily the Sublime version. If you listen to the original, it's very much kind of traditional surfer music. What's his name? Dick Dale, yeah. It gives me that vibe, but this version of it is kind of like almost like a punkish version of it, right? To me, after listening to it again and again and again, it's like if somebody asked me to give them a song that defines surf punk, and I'm sure everyone has their own opinions of it, this feels like surf punk to me. And it's one of the least played songs in this album, and for me, I didn't even think of this song when I was like, all right, let's do this album.
Yeah, it's not one that really, there's 23 songs, so there's a lot to parse through. And to be honest, it wasn't really one that stuck out to me, but I'll give it another listen, that's for sure.
Check out the original, then listen to this. There's a couple, you can do that with every song in this album. Go listen to what they covered or where they pulled the sample from, and then you listen to this, and you're like, oh, okay, I got more appreciation for it, right?
Yeah. Did you choose a least good song on this album?
I did, and I, again, purposely omitted the non-song type of stuff, right? The Raleigh soliloquies were not, that's obvious.
Yeah, it's a given. That shit sucks. I do kind of like the last one where he's kind of singing about like how you never felt love. I don't know who he's singing. It's a real song. I know I've heard it before about how like you only know love if you know the blues. That part's all right, but all the misogynistic ranting and putting a real woman's name on your album, like, ooh, no, come on, bleep that out. What the fuck you doing?
Yeah, he actually has a song registered with the Library of Congress.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, back in 1943. It's called Sweetheart from Way Back When.
Okay. Huh.
I went down the rabbit hole and still don't think there's a confirmation of how Sublime came by his recordings. However, the internet sleuths have definitely figured out who he was and what he did.
Yeah.
And kind of how he ended up where he ended up. But putting all that aside, to me, it's cue ball.
Yeah, I can see that.
Then I said, well, fuck with you, and I'm out for the 9 deuce niggas.
This is 9 Dre, still badass lynching, motherfucking cue ball, and my nigga Brad with the funky reggae style. Check it out, badass coming once again. I'ma shock ya. Don't try to step, cause I'm the rocker. Listen, I'm the nigga.
It's pretty obvious. That's not even a Sublime song, other than it's on the album, right? It's done by this guy named Mike Houlihan, who goes by Cue Ball, and Brother Lynch Hung. Those are the two guys doing the lyrics.
And they fade out like immediately as soon as Cue Ball starts rapping, which makes me feel like they felt bad, so they named the song after him or something.
Well, Cue Ball asked Brad to have a song on the album, and Brad's like, "Oh, sure, why not?" And it's because Cue Ball is kind of like a promoter type of guy, a hustler, right? Trying to find the ends. He actually started like a Sublime tribute band after Brad died, and saying it featured original members of Sublime because he was on Robbin the Hood album, and the Sublime guys and Brad's wife came after him, and so that got shut down.
That's shady as fuck.
Yeah, so it just a lot of bad taste in the mouth with him. And funnily enough, I didn't realize it, but back in my listening to gangster rap days, I actually did like a song from Brother Lynch Hung, which this was just like, wow, that's a weird connection, because I'm like, I know that name, and I went and looked it up and whatever. But yeah, so that was a pretty easy choice.
I actually gave that one a pass, not because I like it or anything, but because it's so short and again, kind of like this album filler. I didn't even think of it. I ended up choosing the song Mary.
Maybe one breath away, I'll find the words to say. I'll sit and light the bone. I'll hold my hit in real long. I don't know if I can go up inside of you tonight. Oh, Mary, baby.
because if you're talking about fucking a 15-year-old girl,
oh gosh,
it's kind of, or 15 plus 1, whatever that means. So a 16-year-old girl. Yeah, no, Brad, no. It's, okay. That's not okay. It's an otherwise pretty decent sounding song.
Yeah.
But like, as soon as you pay attention to the lyrics, it gets uncomfortable very quickly.
You know, sadly, that is the case with plenty of Sublime songs, unfortunately. But
yeah, so part of the reason why I stopped listening to Sublime in a way is that I started to feel like a lot of people I knew who were douchebags really loved Sublime.
Oh gosh.
And I didn't even think about that until the other day. I was driving home and I was jamming this album and I was thinking to myself, what a fucking great car ride album it is, because it's all over the place. It was a nice day, so I had the windows cracked and all this kind of stuff. And I got home and my neighbors were out and like I had the Sublime thumping, and I don't really know my neighbors very well. And I remember to get out of my car and I kind of thought to myself for a second, gee, I hope they don't think I listen to Sublime all the time. Which I feel kind of bad about anyone who's a big fan. I apologize. But like, you know, there was kind of like part of me was like still kind of hung up on that high school image or like maybe early 20s image of the guy who didn't get the irony and the critique in Date Rape, for instance.
100%. Yeah, no, they hate that song. And that's part of the reason why they hate it, is because it was co-opted by the jock kind of culture.
Yeah, that song is not praising Date Rape.
Not at all.
But there is stuff like the lyrics in Mary, and there is some of that other kind of stuff that you give a pass to as a casual listener. But there's some of it that's a little problematic. Yeah, and you're right. And a certain element of people, not everyone who likes Sublime, not by any stretch of the imagination, because you and I both like Sublime.
Yeah.
But there was definitely some people who I'm just like, yeah, of course you like Sublime.
Yeah, you know, they got the Sun shirt from Hot Topic, and they're, you know,
which I still see. I have students that come in wearing that. I'm like, that's awesome. Like teenage kids still wearing Sublime shirts. That makes me happy.
Yeah, for sure. But then you're like, are you wearing it because you're, you know, a douchebag, or are you wearing it because you appreciate the music, right? And it's like a 50-50 roll of the dice sometimes.
I questioned how much I was going to bring this up, this whole aspect of them. But, you know, to address them and their fan base, frankly, you kind of have to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not the band, it's the fans, and it's certainly not all fans.
Yeah, 100%. And going back to, again, my previous episode with Pennywise, you know, there are people who don't like the band because of their fan base.
Which is unfair.
Yeah, and to a certain degree, like, especially Spencer from Pennywise, he kind of just is like, you know, F it, we don't care, F authority, all that type of stuff, and all that mindset brings in an element of, I don't know what the term is that is kind of a hot button usage, but I like to say undesirables, but I think that's kind of like a political term that people use. It.
I think you think of deplorables.
Yes, the deplorables, like just people that aren't using their head. Pennywise, a lot of those guys just are, especially down in Orange County and that area, their crowd base is just going to a show looking for a fight. With Sublime, they're just going to listen to that music and just get sloppy drunk and be, you know, dickheads to women, right? You know, looking at a woman and going, you know, date rape is the only way I can get laid kind of thing, and then leering at them, right? I mean, I saw that in college back in the day. I mean,
yeah, I did too. That's why we're having this conversation, because you and I both saw this on the opposite sides of the country, and I'm sure other people did as well, which I'm glad to hear that the remaining members of Sublime have come to feel differently about date rape, and I bet they feel differently about a lot of those songs. I mean, not to fucking make that classic excuse that it was the 90s, but there was a different kind of metric of what was and was not appropriate at the time, as there is when you're dealing with anyone who's in their teens or early 20s. That's going to change as you get older anyways, and then the times as they change around you also. So it's a shame that there is that element about them, because what they're laying down for the most part is about love and peace and getting fucked up and having a good time, but like generally like pretty feel-good music, and that's what should be their main legacy.
Yeah, and the sheer variety of stuff. I mean, it's just awesome that they're able to fuse so many genres and so many, you know, so much source material that they've taken into their lives, and not just playing the same kind of, you know, again, referencing my previous episode with Pennywise. Like, Pennywise is pretty, you know what you're getting when you're walking in the door to listen to a Pennywise album, right? For 90 to 95% of their songs. Sublime, all over the place, right? Punk, reggae, regular rock, blues, ska.
But all sounding like Sublime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just that is easy to lose sight of if you're just, listening to their popular songs and being idiots about it.
And that kind of mastery of different styles while still retaining their own style, it's what makes them exceptional. And they are. Yeah. They're an exceptional band. You mentioned Saw Red. I feel like we would be remiss to not talk about that pairing of Bradley Nowell and Gwen Stefani, both before they were household names. Yeah, it's a pretty fun song. They sang well together. They jive well together.
Yeah, for sure. That song I can't get out of my head. Every time I listen to it, I start singing it for sure.
Every time you listen to it, it gets stuck in your head a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Every day I love her just a little bit more, a little bit more. All right, I saw red. I don't necessarily kind of like the line about, one more secret lover that I shot dead.
No,
but,
yeah, is that what he says there? I knew there was something about being shot dead.
Yeah.
But it's not literal, so.
Yeah,
presumably.
Exactly. Right? That's the only kind of moment of pause in that song for me. But otherwise, yeah, that's awesome. I've seen him play it on his own too. I mean, he's not going to have Gwen around all the time when he was on tour, but I did see him play it.
So you saw him play live?
Videos. No, I wish. I saw him videos. Sadly, I wasn't going to concerts until 96, right? 97. So he was already passed. Yeah. And then the 97 Snowcore tour, Long Beach Dub All-Stars was on it, and I went, but I was much more interested in getting in the right mindset, shall we say. It was on campus at UC San Diego back then it was called the REMAC Arena. I don't know what it is now, but it was like our main arena there where they played basketball.
The REMAC Arena.
RIMAC. I don't know.
Like the Macarena, but the REMAC Arena.
Right?
Wow. Okay.
So we ended up missing them. Sadly, but they were the openers.
Yeah.
And Blink 182 followed them, so I saw Blink.
I remember that tour, the Snowcore thing. I didn't see it, but I remember it happening.
And then Primus was the headliner.
Nice.
I know they're reforming around his son, Jacob.
Oh, interesting. Jacob
was playing in his own bands and stuff like that. And then they did a fundraiser or something like that for HR of the Bad Brains. That was in December. Mm. At that point, Sublime with Rome was the only existing member was Eric playing bass. Bud had left Sublime with Rome long ago. But for this show, they got Bud back, and it was Eric, and then it was Jacob playing guitar and doing the lead singing. Huh. So in theory, I guess I could go see them at some point. But what I've seen of Jacob is it's not enough like Bradley for me to be motivated to go see it. He just doesn't have that voice. He doesn't have that energy and approach. And it just literally the voice is just so different. And I've heard people say the opposite.
Oh.
But they're forming Sublime now, and Eric left Sublime with Rome. So now Sublime with Rome is just Rome and a bunch of guys who were never involved in Sublime.
And they're still playing Sublime stuff?
They're playing through the end of 24, still doing Sublime covers and their own stuff.
Huh.
And then now Sublime is touring with the Sublime name.
Yeah.
Moving forward. And that was something that they did originally back in 2009 with Rome. And then Brad's wife, Troy, and their estate came after them and said, you can't do that without Brad.
Yeah.
But because Jacob is Brad's son and all that stuff, they're now going to be using the Sublime name moving forward for that iteration.
Well, that seems fair.
Yeah.
Having the same last name doesn't make it the same person.
Exactly.
What song do you want to use to go out on here?
So if you can cut it 10 seconds early so we don't hear any of Raleigh, I think it's got to be Pool Shark Acoustic, because it's so prescient of what kind of ended up happening, right?
He lost the war.
Yeah, it couldn't be more clear. He knew it was coming. It's so sad, but on the other hand, we got all that we got out of a creative genius in such a short time. Take it away, and I want more and more. One day I'm going to lose the war. I mean, like, I hear those lyrics, walk around singing that song, like I said, along with Greatest Hits and, Saw Red.
Right on. Okay, that's what we'll end with. So I always end the show typically with some sort of question. Sometimes, like I'm doing today, I have more like a topic point.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like Sublime is definitely a weed band, right? Like
Yes.
they're definitely a band that you smoke 2 joints listening to it, right? They're just that kind of band. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to get nostalgic about weed in the 90s, because we've come a long way as a society in terms of the availability of weed, the potency of weed. But tell me, what was buying weed like for you back in, say, 1996, 95, whatever, 94, I guess was when this album was. That general area, what was it like for you to buy some weed?
94 was really the beginning for me. That's when I first started smoking, and I was 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So when you first start, a lot of times, it's friends, in certain cases, I guess family too. But for me, it was all my friends. So I didn't do it directly. And so all through high school, for me, from 94 to 96, I was always kind of like the accessory to my friends, right? I'll drive, I got the car, we'll roll up to whoever's house, you'll get out the car, go into the house, come back out, and you got the weed, right? Or just show up at a place, my buddy's house, and he's already got the stuff. So for me, I didn't really primarily do that on a regular basis until I got to college. So I'm in San Diego, and it was a completely different ballgame, right? We're buying, in the Bay Area, we're buying $20 bags, right? The classic Looney song, I got 5 on it. I mean, that was literally what it was, right? Mm-hmm. 4 of us would throw $5 in it, and we'd go buy a gram of weed for $20, right? And roll a joint and smoke it, or roll a blunt. So going down to San Diego was just like a complete 180. You're buying a quarter pound for like $40 down there.
Oh, wow.
It was full of seeds, and it was not high quality.
Yeah.
But there was a massive amount of volume. And at a certain point, you get better and better sources, and you get less and less seeds, but you're still getting relatively amazing prices for it.
Yeah.
And I'd say one of my most vivid memories was going to my buddy's house, and I'm hanging out there. A guy walks in with, the black Glad bags, yard waste bags, and just dropping it down on the kitchen counter, and it was massive amounts. And he's like, yeah, I just went to the spot in the desert where I meet my connect and picked up the bag, bring it to you guys first. You guys get first pick at what you want here. And, buying a pound for a couple $100. That was just breaking a brick off of that. Usually everything's prepackaged, but that one, it was just like, my gosh. Going back to the Bay Area, it was just, again, going back to the other side of the coin where it's just great stuff. Seeds were a rarity. And again, you're still going to people's houses, but there's no coffee shops, there's no places to go, places of business. So it was literally business done at people's houses.
Yeah.
I never did the classic hardcore drug type of stuff where you're getting it on the street corners or whatever. That was never something I did, but
I did. I didn't go to street corners specifically. It'd be like someone's house.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be like someone would know someone, and we drive out there and just kind of sit in the car while the guy who did know the person went inside. Very rarely would I go inside in those kinds of scenarios, but I did a few times, and it was always pretty sketchy. And, buying minimal amounts of weed, like an eighth, maybe a quarter, if I could afford that, And like getting good weed was just out of the question. Seeds and stems, that was part of the deal. And, the weed, like we called it regs, we called it swag, we called it Mexican dirt weed, we called it, the brown pound found on the ground in D-Town. We called it all kinds of shit. And it was never any fucking good. And I remember maybe 97 or so, getting my hands on Northern Lights and being like, wow, this is like weed with a name. This is real weed, And I smoked it, and it had never been so high. And now, just like the other day, that they're selling weed at the corner store, which is like half a mile from my house. And they sell Northern Lights, and it is like the lowest THC content in the entire fucking room. It's wild.
It's unreal. And I definitely remember buying Northern Lights in the 90s, 94, 95, 96, all the time. We had the majority of weed we bought came from British Columbia.
Yeah.
But you'd occasionally get the Humboldt, and it's called the Emerald Triangle in Northern California, that we would get a lot of supply from as well. But that was outdoor for the most part. Whereas the British Columbia stuff, they were much more advanced in the indoor. They were kind of leading the wave of indoor stuff. So the Northern Lights stuff was just always coming from there, always top notch.
Yeah, I heard legends of the weed from that area, but the weed I was used to smoking was the kind of stuff like you talked about, like pulling it off a brick. Like, yeah, you get it in a bag and there'd be like part of it was still half a corner, you know?
Yep.
It's a big chunk that's still like in a corner and you gotta like not smoke the seeds. I mean, the smell, the taste of those fucking seeds.
Oh gosh.
But I'm almost nostalgic for it. I mean, I am. There are times where I wish, you know what, I'd be perfectly happy with a bag of rags that doesn't get me completely lifted, but instead just gets me high for like 20 minutes and then I forget that I even smoked weed.
So when I came back in 98 to the Bay Area, and I came back fully loaded with like the best Mexi weed that Southern California had to offer, San Diego specifically, because LA really wasn't that much like that. LA was more like San Francisco where it was the higher quality stuff, but San Diego being right where it was so plentiful. So I came back with at least like 3 or 4 pounds of it just in my suitcase, moving back to the Bay Area, and it was a hit. They were just like, you can get that much weed? You're going to sell me a quarter pound for $40? I'm like, yeah, dude, that's the going rate for this stuff. It was just the variety and just like, okay, I don't, like you're saying, don't want to get absolutely loaded, but I still want to, you know, have this habitual kind of, I want to smoke right now feeling, right? And take care of it. One final story I'll tell is that, so we were getting it from kind of the Rastafarian type of guy a lot in San Francisco. I hadn't moved up there yet, but my buddy who had that connection already, I went back after my first year of college. So it was the summer of 97. And we went to Oregon. There was a thing called the High Times Hemp Fest.
Okay, I've heard of it.
Reggae bands were playing, and it was just a huge thing out in this field in Oregon, wherever. So we all came loaded from that guy. The weed was purple weed. And like you've never seen it back then. That quantity of that type of stuff. And I think it's just a temperature thing. It's also a bit of a genetic thing. But if you keep it at the right temperature, it'll kind of do that when you're growing. And literally had Cannabis Canada was a magazine producing content as well. And I'm like, these guys don't care. But we're walking around to the booths and you're like trading weed and stuff like that. And we get to the Cannabis Canada booth and we show them what we got. And they're just like, holy shit, man, come to the back of our booth real quick. And we went to the back of their booth and everyone's all laid out on like, they called them, I think, love sacks, but they were kind of like beanbag chairs and stuff like that. Everyone's just,
love sack doesn't sound like something I want.
It was just a brand back then that was also selling product at that show.
Oh, okay.
They photographed all of the purple stuff that we brought and put it in their next month's edition of their magazine. And I'll tell that story simply for the purpose of, you know, I saw it all in the mid 90s, from the highest where you got an actual magazine that was like, you know, holy crap, look at this stuff, to the lowest lows of just bricks full of seeds. I mean, in California, it was unlike anywhere else, that time and place for everything, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, we had such a variety of everything.
Southeast Michigan was like 98% dirt weed, and like every once in a while someone would have something of value, but now it's weed heaven. Go figure.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, man. Well, thanks again. I appreciate you coming back on. I look forward to talking to you again. You take care of yourself.
You too. Talk to you later, Travis.
Bye.
I like lying naked in my bedroom, tying on the dinosaur tonight. It used to be so cool. Now I got the needle and I can shake, but I can't breathe. I'll take it away, but I want more and more. One day I'm gonna lose the war.
A big thanks to Joe Lowry for coming back on the show. It was awesome getting his perspective on Sublime and weed and the whole California 90s scene. He'll be back on the show somewhere down the road. The way that I typically do this is I'll record the introduction to an episode, and then I'll sit down over the course of a week or so and edit the conversation and edit the music in. And during that week, I typically, live my life. And I had a pretty productive week in that I had carpal tunnel release surgery on my right hand, so my right hand is all bandaged up. The much talked about 93-94 night at the New Way Bar in Ferndale hosted by me, presented by Dustin Lintz, friend of the show, I guess we could say, emceed by me. That took place, and it was a big success. I had a ton of fun, saw a lot of people. I'll talk more about that next episode. I could talk about it right here now, but I want to do it next episode for no other reason than that I want to put it at the front of the show. But a big thank you to everybody that came out and made that night possible, especially Dustin. Much love. I saw a lot of people that have been on the podcast. If you too want to be on the podcast, that is a possibility for you, person listening, or maybe you know somebody else that would be a good fit for the pod. Let them know, or you let me know that you want to come on the show. All you got to do is email me at 9394podcast@gmail.com. You can do pretty much any album you want from the era that I haven't already done. Perhaps you want to do Fishbone. Fishbone's Give a Monkey a Brain and He'll Swear He's the Center of the Universe came out in 1993 and featured this track, Servitude. Maybe you want to come on and talk about that. Fishbone kicks ass and they're underrated. They'd be fun to talk about. Or any other album. It doesn't have to be Fishbone. I'm just kind of pitching an idea here. Hit me up, 9394podcast@gmail.com. I'm on Facebook. Please rate and review the show. It really does help the show when people do that. Yeah, so that's it. I will talk to you soon. Thank you for listening. '93-'94, a music podcast with Travis Roy, is a labor of love. It is not and never will be monetized. Please don't sue.